Hello, I am Xarkun, this is World of Warships Legends, and today I want to talk about tips for effective battleship play. I recently made a video entitled Tips for Effective Destroyer Play, where I gave the generalized tips or strategies or whatever you want to call it that should govern your destroyer play. The general principles, let's say, and that's what I want to do in this video with respect to battleships, which play a very different role from destroyers. I said in that destroyer video that destroyers are the most influential class of ships in the game. Their primary role in especially domination mode is to take the capture points and also to spot. In capture the base mode, like this game, the goal is a little bit different. Their primary goal here is to spot targets and potentially to put pressure on the enemy base, which is what one of our destroyers is going to do. Now, it does help in a battleship to know how the spawns work on various maps. In this case, on the western side of the map here, where we see 3 battleships and we are turning to the west, this is the weak side, where potentially up to 6 enemy ships could close in on this side with the 3 ships and take them out and then push in toward our base. On the opposite side of the map, eastern side, we have a number of blue ships, and on that side of the map, on the enemy spawn, there should be a small number of red ships, in that case 3. So what we're doing here is we're turning to the west to reinforce our western weak side, and we're going to put ourselves in a position to deal damage to these 3 ships out there, the Nagato, the Jean Bart, and the Baltimore. Meanwhile, we have a friendly battleship pushing up on that western side, along with our friendly destroyer, a Z-23, and our friendly cruiser, a Fiji. As a battleship, your role is, at least in my opinion, alternatively a support class ship, and you support your teammates by both dealing damage to enemy ships, particularly enemy cruisers, who should be your primary target, especially enemy radar cruisers, who present the biggest threat to your team's destroyers, since they have the radar consumable, which can spot destroyers inside of smoke screens, through islands, and all the rest. So your goal is to support your teammates by dealing damage to the enemy cruisers, hopefully taking them out, and also dealing damage to the enemy battleships. And you want to, at least in the beginning of the match, try to do this at range in most battleships. Now, of course, every nation has different battleships that specialize in different things, but for the most part, in the beginning of the match, say the first 5-6 minutes or so, positioning yourself at range and dealing damage at range is what you want to do. That's what we're doing here, shooting at the Baltimore and the Jean Bart. Now, our friendly battleship has moved in, and this is a very aggressive play on his part, probably not a great one. You certainly don't want to push in like this aggressively, this early, against so many enemies. But because that friendly battleship is in that position, he's captured the attention of the Jean Bart, who's now dead, the Baltimore, and this Nagato. And what they needed to do when he was still alive, he's just been sunk, is angle their ships toward him, which means they aren't paying attention to me, and therefore I am able to deal damage to them basically for free, unopposed. Now, I do need to take out this Baltimore before he can do anything bad to the friendly Fiji or destroyer. Taking the shot at him, he goes down. Again, radar cruisers, most important target for battleships to shoot at. In the higher tier battleships, you definitely want to figure out which cruisers are radar cruisers, and you want to put them number 1 on your list of targets. And now, because of our support here, this western side of the map is almost entirely clear. Only a Nagato is left to stand in the way of the friendly Fiji and the friendly Z-23, who are going to push along the western map border toward the base. So now we want to deal damage to this Nagato, hopefully take him out. He is getting hammered by the Fiji as well. And once he goes down, then there isn't going to be much left in the way of opposition for my teammates to push up along this western flank. At this point, now that the herd has been thinned out a little bit, we can transition from our heavy-hitting support role into more of an offensive playmaker, sort of a dominator. We've got this Massachusetts out here, and we are going to push up and brawl with him, which is something the Amagi can do. Not all battleships can do well at close-range brawling type fights, but the Amagi, it does have a turtleback armor scheme around its citadel. I'm not sure exactly how effective it is. I don't play the Amagi very often, but it can be an effective close-range brawler. And a lot of battleships can play that role as well, although it is best, as I said, to start off at longer ranges, put yourself in a position where you can reinforce potentially the most vulnerable parts of the map that your team occupies and deal damage to cruisers and enemy battleships. And we have done that. Now we're moving in to deal damage to this Massachusetts, also taking shots at that broadside Baltimore out there. You always want to be looking at the map, always want to be looking at the screen too, but mostly the map, to see if there are any targets that are broadside to you, and those are your primary targets. I said in destroyers that dealing damage is not necessarily the goal, and it really isn't in destroyers, but in battleships, dealing damage is sort of the goal. And also tanking damage. You want the enemies to be shooting at you because you can take the hits. Another important thing about effective battleship play is understanding armor angling. When an enemy ship is shooting armor piercing at you, if you are presenting a flat broadside, like this Massachusetts, then their shells are going to be able to penetrate. But if you angle the armor and present an angle to the enemy ships, then their shells are going to have a chance to bounce or ricochet off of your armor. So you do need to angle, and in that way you can tank shots from enemy battleships that might otherwise go into your cruisers and kill them or cause them lots of harm. We do get the kill on the Massachusetts there with our secondaries for the Close Quarters Expert Medal, which I just want to point out is a bit ironic, considering the Massachusetts arguably has better secondaries than the Amagi, but he's gone, and this Baltimore out there looks like he's probably going to be our next target, since he appears to be standing in the way of the friendly Z-23 and Fiji in terms of them putting pressure on the enemy base. Taking a shot at the York there, who is firing at a very low health Wichita, and now we're going to use our rear guns to take a shot at the Gneisenau, hopefully capture his attention and get him to stop shooting at the friendly Fiji, which, again, that is the support role of the battleship, dealing damage to other battleships, encouraging them to fire back at you and not fire back at your cruisers, who can't necessarily take all those hits. The Gneisenau has turned his attention, though, to the friendly Wichita, and he has just taken him down, but in doing so, he has presented broadside to me, and I was able to hit him for 12k. Another thing that you need to be very aware of in a battleship is your own position on the map and the ships around you that have access to your broadside. You want to make sure you are presenting an angle to them. We're in a situation, though, where we are going to be caught in a bit of a crossfire between the York and the Gneisenau, who's pushing in behind us. So obviously, we want to try to present an angle to the Gneisenau so that he can't have access to our broadside and potentially citadel us. And then we want to deal damage to this York and hopefully kill him, since we are going to be the most effective at doing it. But this York is actually a pretty good player. He's not making himself a very easy target to take down, and I think he is going to score top on the enemy team's leaderboard. He's also shooting HE at us, and German HE has better penetration than most other cruisers' HE, so it is doing damage to us pretty much every time it hits, and it's lighting fires, which is further diminishing our hit points, and then the Gneisenau is doing chip damage to us. This is why you don't want to push out in a battleship early in the game and attract the fire of multiple ships, because even though battleships can take hits from enemy ships, they don't last long under sustained focus fire like this, even with just 2 ships like a Gneisenau and a York shooting at you simultaneously and not shooting at anybody else or being distracted by anybody else. So we are going to end up dying here to the York and the Gneisenau, but that's okay. As you can see, there is an enemy destroyer smoked up in our base, and he is starting to take it, but my teammates are in his base. And because this York and Gneisenau have spent all this time shooting at me, whittling me down, next shot is going to kill me from the York. But because these two have done this, and because they are so close to my base, they're way too far away from their own base to defend it. And so, the friendly Fiji and friendly Z-23 are going to be able to capture the base and win the game for us. And the reason that they are able to do that is because I chose to sail toward the western flank and support them. So, in closing, battleships are alternatively the support class and the offensive playmakers. If destroyers are the tip of the spear in terms of playing the game, in terms of making winning plays, then the battleships are the shaft of the spear, which rams the spearhead into the enemy's gut. And that's basically how I think about battleships, and hopefully you found the advice and tips helpful. If so, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.